Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Malloy here, coming to you from my offices overlooking New York City with a topic that's near and dear to everyone's heart, how to stop employee turnover. And I just want to open this up, and I've got some wonderful co-hosts with me here today, Mr. Stephen Warner and Mr. Greg Gershman, who are going to share their knowledge. I, as a businessman for the past, I don't know, I can't even tell you how long, one of the biggest challenges that we face is recruiting and retaining employees. Okay. And I've come to grips with that it's expensive, super expensive in so many different ways. And I know Greg is going to talk about that. But what I've come to grips with in my life as a businessman is that I need to be in the people development business. Recruiting is not just about finding someone to fill a particular role and then put them in and they're going to sell tires or brakes or alignments or whatever business you happen to be in. It's got to be something much bigger than that, which we're going to talk about, meaning developing people, opening possibilities for the new hire to stick with you for a long time, turn it into a career. How do we do that? So the whole recruiting process, the vision that we paint for them, the commitment that we make to the employees has to be something different perhaps than it is now. So we're here to open new possibilities for you guys. I'm thrilled to be able to do this with Stephen and Greg, and our commitment is to share ideas that can help you guys. So without further ado, let me say welcome, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Greg Gershman.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome, everybody. So today we're going to talk about things you can do inside your company to help curb turnover. And my background is, right now I run a company that's essentially an HR company, helps people hire. And we're here today with Stephen Warner from Automoto HR. And Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Stephen, and actually I do run a company that's also in HR. And basically what we do is we help companies to be able to not only advertise their jobs, but also to manage all of that process from the advertisement part all the way into the hiring, and actually then after that into the onboarding and elsewhere.
Now, Dan, why don't you go on over to the next slide so we can talk a little bit about, why this is so important and why we're all here today.
Yeah, here you go.
Now, sometimes it can be a little nebulous to kind of figure out what it's actually costing you to turn an employee. So I want to go over that a little bit so you can identify, inside your company and really transmit this to your managers, why this is such an important topic to work on. And on average, to replace an employee costs 50% of the average employee's annual earnings. So what that's going to mean for you is that if I have a group of salespeople and the average salesperson makes 60 a year, that it's going to cost me 30 to replace that person. And the more expensive the employee, the higher the cost to replace them. So if I lose my top salesperson that's making 150 a year, replacing that guy costs 75 grand. And there's a few reasons that it gets more expensive the higher the type of employee I have. And a couple of first are fixed costs. So the first would be advertising, right? So I obviously have to place ads on lots of job boards or use headhunters or find another means to, let people know that I've got to fill the position. Next, and this is kind of a lost cost that people don't anticipate as much, but there's a lot of labor time, screening candidates, reviewing resumes, interviewing candidates. It can cost up to 40 to 50 hours of actual labor time to go ahead and, fill the position. So, and usually that's done by a manager. So if I have a manager that's making $80,000 a year and he's going to dedicate 50 hours of labor to finding this, it's going to cost me thousands right up front. Then there's, of course, training that person. And, Dan, if I have a new service advisor, let's say, because I know you train a lot of them,
right?
how many hours of training do you think a service advisor needs to go from functional, I hired the guy who knows a little bit, to say producing averagely for my company?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, it's hard to answer, but I say depending on their experience in the business per se, operationally, how sound are they to begin with? That's one thing, right? And the other thing is, are they in the communication business to begin with? Are they good communicators? So I would say conservatively, it's going to take a few months to get somebody up to speed in both areas.
Right? And that's not
Operationally,
only cost of training the person, but it's the cost of the manager inside your company that's got to be involved with it, right? Do they need
yes,
to spend 30, 40, 50 hours with this person over the span of 2 or 3 months? And then the last is what we call opportunity cost. And this is why it gets more expensive the better the employee you lose. It's going to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months for a new employee, no matter how talented they are, to get up to the level of even being an average employee for your company in production,
right.
to
Yep.
reach their potential. So if they're selling 40% less for their first 3 to 6 months or 50% less, that's one of the actual highest costs of finding a new employee. And
Greg, let me just
yeah,
let me just interrupt here real quick and just let people know if you have questions, feel free. I'm gonna as Greg and Stephen are chatting and I jump in here and there. If you have questions, you can use the ask questions in your control panel. You'll see an area where you can type in questions, and I'll monitor that. Okay, and you can raise your hand. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, go ahead, Greg.
and Stephen, but before we got on, you were even talking a little bit about when we were talking about that opportunity cost and the training, that you have a lot of clients. What are their expectations when they hire a new person?
Well, and I think that's where the big failure happens is that they got used to the person that was there before. They hire this person with certain expectations, and because it took so long, oftentimes it'll take probably from the time they advertise until they actually hire somebody, maybe a month or so. So now they've got this person in there. They're built up with anticipation. The person gets there. Um, they have expectations. And they're expected to kind of just jump in and take over where the last person left off. Well, they even if they're from the same industry, there's going to be that time period where they get used to the way you do things, the way you, and then if you don't give them any training on how you do it, both of you guys are going to have uh, you know missed opportunities, or your expectations are not going to be met, which causes frustration and causes both people to kind of lose hope in that new hire.
I think,
Yeah.
let me just jump in on that. I think that setting expectations right up front about a couple of things. One is that it's got to be very, very, very clear to a new hire exactly how you do business. Operationally, this is how we run our business from a operations standpoint, and communication wise. This is how we communicate internally, and this is how we communicate with customers, and this is what's expected of you. Those two areas. And then the third piece is that we're a learning organization. So that if you hire somebody, and this is all pointed to how to reduce turnover, hiring people that are open to learning, that are committed to learning. From my perspective, mission critical. You could hire somebody with 30 years experience. They got all the right tool, but they don't want to learn. It's going to be a tough road to hoe. Believe me.
Dan, I
They
think
have,
Yeah.
also
yeah.
with both the new hire and then the existing employees, setting up a progression plan. So basically a roadmap as to what
Yes.
they can expect, and then for the new hire, hey, if I do start with this company, am I starting this from the get go? Am I starting this job as let's say I start at the bottom of the rung. I started, let's say, as a porter, and in 25 years, if I just keep doing the best that I can, will I be a porter in 25 years? Or is there a path for me to get to the next steps? and what is the path, and what is the directions I need to take to do that, and as well as retaining employees, what are their expectations, and what is the progression plan for them? What would they need to do at each step to progress, or to continue going on?
You know, it's
Okay.
go ahead,
Um,
Greg.
Dan, let's move over to the next slide, because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, we're actually going to mention in a little bit.
We're
So
jumping
I
ahead
just
of
want to,
ourselves.
yeah. So I just want to get through the next
All
little
right.
bit. Um, Essentially, a lot of the solutions that a lot of HR companies will tell you to follow to curb turnover are extremely expensive for businesses. And we want to talk about less expensive alternatives that take a little elbow grease. But three of the more popular ones are: first, to radically change your benefits so that it's almost impossible to leave. So an example might be all your competitors pay for half of everybody's health care and you pay for all of it. There's also accepting mediocre performance. A lot of HR companies will tell you that unless somebody is absolutely terrible, don't flip them. Don't try to upgrade within your company because it's expensive, right? So they'll tell you to avoid that. The last is overpaying against your competitors. So if I'm running a shop and let's say the market pays $22 per flat hour for a B-rate tech, and I start spending $30 a flat rate hour to get that same person. But the problem with all these solutions, they're extremely expensive. And as we're going to get into later, a lot of times people aren't leaving specifically over a pay plan or benefit package. There's a
Hmm.
lot of other reasons. So you can end up throwing a lot more money into the pot and still end up with all the turnover. And so it's got this multiplying effect and becomes even more expensive for you to keep employees. So my advice is that as long as you're competitive with the market, that you shouldn't try to massively exceed it. Um, Dan,
What are some of the reasons? What are some of the reasons in your experience? If I ask this question to both of you gentlemen, what is some of your experience why people stay on a job? Why they want to stay there? What's the reasons?
um, well, that's involved with some of the things we got coming, but usually it's because they see a path to success, a future.
Yeah.
So if I'm with a company and my perception is that it's always going to be getting better for me, the odds are that I'm going to stay with the company, that I'm going to build loyalty with them. And that's part of what we're going to talk about is, hey, how do I build loyalty from the employee to the company? And how do I give them a perception that things are always going to be better for me in the future? And people are usually willing to hang in for that as long as you're paying them a fair wage, a competitive one, and giving them competitive benefits. They're usually willing to hang in for that.
Well, you know what I always discuss during my power sales training sessions with people is that with students and with colleagues is that a business is a network of commitments. Okay, we owner operators and people on this call want employees and new hires to commit to us. We want big commitment from the new hire to us to where we're going. At the same time, we have to generate and cause and invent and create commitments that they can see. Like Stephen was saying, that the commitment shows up like a roadmap for the future. So they go home after a week on the job and they go to their I tell their family, tell their wife or their husband, whatever. I can't believe I'm in this job. It's fabulous. The future looks so bright. This is their assessment.
Dan, you're exactly correct. It's the power of feeling valued. That when you leave, it doesn't matter what position you're holding, but when you leave and you do go back to your family and you go, gosh, I can't believe they hired me. I'm so lucky to be there. Um, it isn't always about the money. It's not about the building. It's not about all the other things. You'll put up with a lot of things, if you feel like you're a valued member of a team.
Yes.
If you feel like you're valued and that you can go somewhere with it, that you're not in a box, that you're not caged, that you're not controlled. Um, Now if you're on the beginning rung of the hierarchy, but you see the future in that place, and you see that, hey, even me at the bottom here, I have a voice and I have a value that they recognize. I think that
Yes.
right there is you'll put up with a lot of stuff in order to keep that job and stay there.
I
So
want to
Dan,
share.
why don't you
Go
show
ahead.
the next slide? Because
Okay.
that kind of leads into, really, there's three areas that we can work on solving turnover, right? And a lot of what Dan and Stephen are talking about with commitment and with positive future, um, they're involved in these three steps, right? Number one, I can look for indications that turnover is going to come up in the interview process. Number two, that through team building, I can build a relationship with this employee so they're loyal to my company. And number three, I build customer relationships from the employee to the customer so they're loyal to the customers, which keeps them around my company.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one we're going to go over would be the interview part. Right, we'll kind of do them in order. Um, and the next slide has kind of got the root causes that you would find in the interview, the things you can look for that'll indicate that this person may not stay with your company long term. The first are schedule issues. A lot of people leave because they get pressure from their family, because they can't go to their kids' ball games. Schedule isn't meshing properly. They're missing dinners. They're missing activities outside of work. There's commute, which is, I think, a very undervalued issue. Where somebody will take your job and they're willing to drive an hour now, but the second that they find a job that's 15 minutes from their house, they're going to switch to another job. Stress. How stressful is the month end inside your company? Can this employee tolerate it? And then last, and this is also another one that isn't talked about a lot in a lot of interviews, but there's ego level. Can this person understand their place in my company and accept that? If I'm hiring you as, say, a service advisor, I don't want you to think of yourself as the service manager the day you come in. That may not work for my company. It's going to lead right into turning the person. In the next slide, I've got some examples of questions that you might ask in your interview that'll help you kind of ferret these things out.
This is great, Greg. And Sandy just asked a question. She said, just chiming in here, millennials in particular want to perceive that they are making a difference in what they're doing in their work.
Yep.
And I think giving people feedback. I just want to share a quick story about this topic. I have a client out in Oklahoma City, Pat's Tire Pros, right? And he's got 4 locations. Great guys, great clients, wonderful guys. There's an article coming out in this month's issue of Tire Review magazine on page 42 about the 4 amigos. And this goes to developing what Steven's talking about, the track for the future. Pat is an interesting guy, and the owner, and he opened up our training to 4 lube tech. He had 3 lube techs, tire busters, and 1 driver, and invited them to come in and learn how to communicate more effectively. A year later, he's got 4 guys that can handle an inbound phone call like anybody in the company, like a pro. And so I look at it, I'm amazed. And first of all, we wrote this story about these guys because they've taken on, who would think of taking tire busters and oil change guys and turning them into salespeople? It doesn't happen in the industry. It just doesn't. But Pat opened up a route for them to improve their skill set. And I think we did a good job at creating a training for them where they could see value for themselves as human beings, not just about selling tires and brake. By learning what we're teaching them, they enhanced their value to themselves and to the company. And it's like a miracle occurring in Oklahoma City and
That
elsewhere too. Go ahead.
that also creates an environment where, again, everybody feels valued, and that they can see that progression. And God forbid something happens with maybe a manager or somebody that you have running that shop, and now you need one of those folks to step up and step into that position like right away. You've already built that environment where that person can jump in and thrive. And then again, you bring in the next person at the bottom. Let's say that starts as a lube tech that comes in, and you do the same thing with them. So now you always have an environment where you're not stressed about how am I going to find a replacement manager. You already have somebody that knows your process and your culture already built in.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
finding somebody that is open to learning, and Pat lucked out with these four because because they really want to learn, and they have. So it's really inspiring.
Here.
I think
Yeah.
to Sandy's question too is or comment is every generation. You know, we mentioned millennials all the time, but I think we just put up with a lot of. I'm not in the millennial group. I'm a little bit older than that, but you know, we put up with a lot of the stuff that they're not willing to put up with. But really, at our core, we want exactly the same. You know, we want to go someplace where we're valued. Um, Now the difference is
Yes.
they have options, they have choices. So the companies that are the ones that will set a process in place where again people can feel valued and progress. Those are
Hmm.
the folks that are going to be able to retain them. Where the other ones are going to be sitting asking, "Hey, what's going on?"
Right. Yep.
Hey, Dan, let's flip because I can get by because you guys are talking a lot about the training and how that affects it. That's almost like the next slide after this. So I'll just get through the few questions in the interview. Um, and then, Stephen, you can talk about, we were talking about a manager that, really made an impact on you before the call. Um, the key to asking questions, and I put some examples up on the screen here during the interview for these four categories, is to ask questions about their prior jobs. So instead of dictating to them the schedule that you want, talking to them about how long the drive is and kind of telling them that's expected, or telling them that, month end's a little hectic, but we help you get through it. Or talking about opportunities for advancement, looking at the ego category that maybe your company doesn't particularly have. I would go the route of asking the candidate what their views are first, to see if they're a mesh, and be very honest about what your company is. So like the first one there about schedule, asking an employee, hey, in your prior jobs, tell me about times you needed time off and how you got that, right? Who did you have to go to? How did it happen? To see if the other company made it hard for them to take time off. Did they just let them call in that morning and not come in? How were things at the last company? And try to mesh that with how your company runs. I mean, if your company honestly almost never gives people time off or doesn't want them to use vacation, well, then if you have a person that was used to being gone whenever they want to be gone at their last company, they might be a bad fit no matter how talented they are. Or like the ego issue, asking them, hey, what's an area where you were better than one of your prior managers? Most people will tell you that I was better at this one individual thing, and you can see in them, how did they handle that? Were they always sitting there thinking that they should have replaced their prior manager? Did it affect how they were working? And then ask them, were they given any room individually to shine? So you can start to get a sense for how they feel about growth opportunity, right? Is this a key for them where they need to be progressing, right? Dan, that's what you and Stephen were talking about, right? How
Right.
does this person feel about it? Am I coming here to be a lube tech and I'm happy to be a lube tech? Or is the thing that's most important to me, I'm coming here as a lube tech, but someday I want to run one of these.
Right. Exactly. There's a future.
And here, Stephen, if you want to go to the next slide, Dan, Stephen, we were talking earlier, and you guys have been talking about training and building loyalty through that, right? How I team build, and the employee wants to stay with me because of that. Stephen, you were talking about a prior, executive that you had that had an impact.
Yeah, so I went to go work for the Penske Group about 25 years ago. So this gentleman was way ahead of the curve in everything that he did, and they built a culture kind of around the whole progression stuff, valuing each employee. So I went to go work for the Penske Auto Group, or Penske Group at the time, and Greg Penske, who was Roger Penske's son, was running the group, including Longo Toyota. And at the time, I think they owned about probably 10 stores. And he would drive to each of the stores to do the monthly manager meeting. And when he would sit down, this person would memorize every number on every for every department in every single store. So we were looking at our sheets, getting ready, and he would already have all of this stuff memorized. So again, put a big impression on me and made me want to aspire to be more like him in that respect. But where he garnered probably the most loyalty, after each meeting at each store, he would walk with the managers through the service drive, through the service department, through the wash bays, through the whole store, and through the business office, and he would walk up to each employee and greet them by their name. So a porter that had started a week ago, he would walk up to him and say, "Hi, Greg, nice to meet you," or "Great to see you. Thanks for working for us. Thanks for this. Thanks for that." And of course, the person, especially if they were new, were completely shocked. They couldn't believe that the owner of this huge corporation had come to them and greeted them and asked how they were doing and actually cared about them. So you can imagine that person that maybe just started going home and telling his family about how the owner of this huge corporation, I'm just a porter, but the owner of this huge corporation came up and wanted to know my opinion. He called
Yes.
me by my name.
Yep.
How did he know my name? And he would do that with every technician. And I'll tell you, we had no turnover. We had a line of people wanting to work there. You actually even had to, at one point, to go work for that corporation, you had, as a salesperson, had to bring in a W-2 because there was such a large desire to work at this company, and the culture and the training was ongoing. So when you first started, you went to a training for a week. Doesn't matter if you were a porter or a general manager. So they set the expectations, and everybody, again, the porter was sitting right next to the GM, learning the exact same stuff about the culture. So the way that
Nice. Yep.
Greg was able to do it is every employee would get an ID card, and it would have their photo on it and their name. He would take the time to memorize each of these people's name because it was that valuable to
Hmm.
him. And
Nice.
again, you can imagine how valuable it was to that employee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
And Dan, we were talking earlier, a lot of times you do training for a lot of service advisors and other people inside companies. And, even from your shorter interaction with them, which obviously isn't 24 hours a day for months, you still have people that stay connected with you, just bonding over the information that you're imparting to them, even in short periods of time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very conscious that people do things today. We all do things today because we think the future is going to be better. So I'm always trying to share and teach and coach people about the future. That they work with me today, and that something's going to happen for them that's going to be better. They're going to be more competent. They're going to be more powerful. They're going to be more skilled. When? Tomorrow. And I try to give them something that they can put on the court tomorrow, this afternoon, even, that they can put on the court that's going to help them, help their company, help them at home. I believe on some level that we're here to help each other, period. And I think so that's what I try to impart.
Right. And beyond just the information that you're giving them, they start to feel a bond with you because you're sharing in their improvement. It's together. It isn't just you telling them something.
I think
It's
they come back to see me all the time because of the jokes that I tell. I'm saying I want to shout
yeah.
out to Danny Smith, and I see a good friend and client out here, and I see Randy Callie too. Randy's is coaching with me now. So hi guys, and no, we have a lot of fun. I mean, we have to have fun on some level. It's I think it's about helping each other. So new hires come in, we have to help them. They have to realize that they have to help us. There have to be clear standards in place. This is how we're going to go to market, just like Stephen was sharing. This is how we do it here. And this has got to be expressed in language and communication by the owner operators, the managers. Everybody's got to be on the same team. And again, I think when I said before about companies being networks of commitments, The owner operators committed to the employees committed back again to the owner operators in a big way. The bigger the commitment, the more likely people are going to stick. Then as a unit, you've got two groups, employees and owner operators committed to each other, who now make a joint commitment to take care of the customers.
Yeah, and that's the last slide that we've got. And just because I know that we're getting on our 30-minute mark and we want people to be able to ask questions. So a lot of times we think a lot about the relationship from an employee to the business being the driver for retaining employees. And it is very important. But one of the greater ways you can actually keep your employees is to get them to have a personal relationship, or as close to it, with your customers, where they each know each other by name. And when an employee shows up, they know that they're going to take care of Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones. And there's this pride in the customer wanting to deal with them personally.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of bond cements people to your company, to the point where you'll see a very good employee will actually have a hard time taking a day off, because there's a particular customer that might come in or normally comes in that they want to be the one in front of them to take care of them because they know them. And you'll find that these types of relationships keep employees at your business, because they don't want to lose all these customers that they're connected to, which obviously builds revenue for the company and obviously builds a better paycheck for your employee, but cements everything together. That type of commitment both ways, where the customer commits to your employee, not just your company.
Right. Right.
You know, Stephen, you just bought a car a couple of days ago.
I
Right?
did. And when I actually narrowed it down to two particular stores, I've been in the business for 25 years, 26 years, the car business. And so basically what I was trying to do was I went to both of these websites, and they were equally distance away from where I live. So there was really no reason to go to one over the other. But what actually made the decision for me is I went to their website and I looked at their staff page. And the one store did not share their staff page with me, which kind of gave me the impression that they don't value their staff enough to recognize them.
Hmm.
So, and basically the other store did. And when I looked at both stores again, I probably know 5 people that work at the store that didn't put the staff page on. So when I went to that page and I didn't see it, I don't know who works there now. So I couldn't call them to say, hey, I'm thinking, because I know so many people in the industry, I wanted to call somebody and just prep before I came. And I wasn't able to do that because I don't know who works there. So they lost the opportunity. I looked at the other one. They didn't have anybody that I knew, but the general manager was friends with somebody that is in my network that I do know. So I called him and set it up that way. If the other store had just had the staff page on there, they probably would have gotten my business. But because they didn't recognize, or I think they're trying to hide their employees, or they're ashamed that maybe their employees are turning over too quickly, they just don't show them. But that lost them my business. So that little simple thing. And again, it's recognizing and showing value to your employees. Also, too, if I had gone and looked at a bunch of stores and I found one that I liked, but I forgot the sales guy's name or salesperson's name, at least on the staff page, I can go there. Oh yeah, it was Austin. Austin was the guy that I talked to. I see his picture right there. I see his name. So now when I call in or go in, I can ask for that person. So again, I think it's recognizing the person. It not only helps you keep your employees, but it also helps you with your business.
Yeah, fabulous. Yep.
Two last thoughts on this, and this is more of a feeling thing. I want you to remember the time that you went into a business and unexpectedly recognized somebody, even if you were mildly friendly with them, how that changed your experience, how much more positive you were about it because you walked in and knew somebody in wherever it is that you walked into. And the same is true for an employee. when they're inside and they're going through their day and, you know, they're on a service desk or they're out on the showroom floor and somebody comes in and recognizes them, it absolutely brightens their day, changes it, you
Yes.
know, beyond just an income opportunity.
Yep.
There's just this warmth that there's a person there that knows me. And those are the kind of feelings and things that are outside of, you know, how much is my paycheck this week, that really changes a person's opinion about staying with your company. It's how many times do I have that connection on a monthly basis where I feel like that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, thank you, Greg. Fabulous.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this tremendously. It's now 2:35. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the box on your control panel. We'll stick around for another minute or two here. And if anybody has any questions, you could also just raise your hand and I could open, if you have a question, I could open you up. Alejandro has a question. Let me unmute Alejandro. Let's see what his question is. Alejandro, how are you? Are you there? I've just unmuted you. If you want, you can type in on your control panel, but I don't hear you. So
Looks like Dan has a question, Dan Smith.
my friend Danny Boy, you got the $20 I loaned you. I talk about humor. See what I tell you about? He's a funny guy. He's a very funny guy. No, I don't, Dan. I don't have the $20. Anyway, how's that? That's even funnier. Who else has a question? Sandy. Well, Sandy has a question. What is your? Well, here's a question. Another question for Sandy. What is your advice for a two rooftop dealer, 200 employees, who wants to onboard new employees completely electronically? Interesting. Great question.
Well, Steven's company, Automoto HR, you know, they have a complete program for that. But it's very simple. Our company, actually, we use it for everything. So I'm one of Steven's big advocates, right, Steven?
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Sandy, for the plug. Thank you very much. Yeah,
I think personally, let me just jump in and just say, I think personally that this is a topic, Greg, for a whole other session.
Yeah. And actually, while we got Sandy on the line, at some point, give me a call or a message. We'd love to have you on one of these to talk about specifically HR issues with compliance and paperwork and onboarding and all those things, because it's very important and it's a constant issue for companies.
Absolutely, yeah. She would be fantastic. Sandy is a pro at the HR space. And a plethora of information. I mean, like, it just explodes out of her head. So yes, she would be a fantastic guest.
We could talk for 2.5, 3 hours, 2 days about this topic Sandy just raised. So I think it's really, really, really important. The whole idea of trying to onboard people electronically all the way. I don't know if that's even possible, to be honest with you.
Oh, it definitely is.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm open to learning. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, with a system like again, the one that ours, kind of a little plug there is, you can actually structure that so that your progression for your person, they'll let them electronically file all their forms, go through the whole process, schedule training, do training, kind of the whole process can be done electronically now. So if you are still doing it by hand, there are solutions out there that can really, really help. Also for compliance stuff, really just a number of different reasons. And also, again, everybody is mobile now, so there's no reason not to keep it that way.
So which is fine. I don't, all that stuff is fabulous. I love it. But how do you get to the point where in what you, like you were describing before in your relationship, with it was Penske, right?
Yes.
Where in that model does the commitment show up?
So really from the get-go, really, it's from the first conversation. It's we hire people based on our culture. We value each one of them, so it's important to us that we set the standard from the get-go to let you know what the standard is, so you know what the expectation is before you make a commitment to us. We're not asking you to make a commitment to the unknown. We're going to lay that out from the get-go to let you know what all the expectations are, and that's kind of what Greg was referring to about setting up in your interview questions, correct interview questions, having them templated so that you can go through the process and you can get the answers that you're looking for on a consistent basis. If you're asking every single person the same question during the interview, you start to establish a pattern.
Right.
And
Okay.
from that pattern, again, you already know what your expectations are and what you're looking for. So if you set those up in your interview questions, again, you'll have a consistent answer. And you're asking, again, compliance reasons, you need to ask every single person the same question. So
here's an interesting observation from Alejandro, and I'm too bad we couldn't hear you, Alejandro. He says we own a 12-bay shop, which is a substantial shop, and we've been running at half capacity due to this exact issue that we're talking about today. So we should talk, Alejandro. Yeah.
Alejandro,
definitely.
I also used to own a couple independent auto repair shops, and I know the pain that you're suffering through. And again, what we're talking about today really fits in. You need to set that culture, make everybody feel valued. The company that Dan had mentioned about making everybody from the new person that just starts at the lowest level, making them feel just as valuable as everybody else. And training them up so that they have expectations of staying with you and moving up through the ladder. All of a sudden now you've built that value for those folks. And what I found when I did it that way, what would end up happening is I would have a line of folks. I was in a plaza with 12 other auto repair shops, and mine was probably the smallest space, but the biggest by volume and sales and everything else. And everybody used to ask, "What are you doing? All my guys want to leave me and go to you." I just made everybody feel valuable. And again, I wasn't paying any more. I wasn't doing anything different as far as, the pay wise or benefits wise, but I made them feel valued, and I trained them all to replace me.
So Alejandro replies, we don't even receive the applications. So I think there's a solution here for you, Alejandro, and my suggestion would be to speak with Greg Gershman, because he can help you with that, I'm sure. I also want to just let everybody know it's now 2:42. We're going 15 minutes over. This is a huge topic. I think my friend Randy Cowley had a question. Randy, are you there? I'll try to unmute you. No, for some reason it's not working. If you have a question, Randy, please type it in. I'll be happy to address it, or have Greg and Stephen address it for you. Yeah, so Keith Rucker said, I want to be able to go back and listen to this again. Yes, Keith, the session has been recorded, and Greg will make it available to everybody, and we'll make sure to get everybody a link to that recording.
Yeah, I'm going to create a blog page, and it'll have the recording on it as well as a few notes.
Yeah, great question. You're welcome, Keith. No problemo. So, guys, I think this is great, wonderful today. There's some topics, definitely new topics for consideration that we need to discuss. But on that note, unless there's any other questions coming in, okay, Alejandro, please help. Yes, help is on the way, Alejandro. Greg, we have to go.
After the webinar, I'll get Alejandro's information and give him a ring.
Fabulous. All right, guys. On that note, I want to bid everybody a nice, have a great week, great weekend, and we'll catch you in the next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.